Welcome to the GridWise Architecture Council's video library. The following presentation by Blake Ellis is entitled Decarbonizing the Built Environment, ASHRAE's Strategic Approach, and was presented to the GridWise Architecture Council on January 15th, 2025. Welcome, Blake.
All right. I'll give a little intro. So welcome to the GridWise Architecture Council meeting. Blake Ellis is a principal with Burns and McDonald, and I'll let him give a further introduction, speaking today about the ASHRAE Center of Excellence for Building Decarbonization. Welcome, Blake.
Thanks for having me here today. Again, yes, Blake Ellis. I am a principal with Burns McDonald in my day job, working on campus and district utilities, but I spend a lot of time volunteering for ASHRAE in a couple of different ways. One, I'm on the board of directors, serving as a director at large, but I'm currently the vice chair of ASHRAE's Center of Excellence for Building Decarbonization. And I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about the title here you see is, Decarbonizing the Built Environment. What is ASHRAE's strategic approach? So with that, we'll kind of jump into it. Just as a high level of making sure people understand what ASHRAE is. It's a professional organization of over 50,000 members all across the world, and that we're in 130 countries. As you can see, nearly 200 local chapters where our members actually go to local chapter meetings. But we're also involved in creating standards and guidelines, and we're all focused on the built environment. And we have a lot of people within the built environment, from consulting engineers, contractors, manufacturers, pretty much the breadth of anyone involved in the built environment from a heating, cooling, and air conditioning standpoint. So our mission in ASHRAE is to serve humanity by advancing the arts and sciences of HVAC and R and their allied fields. So really a technical-based organization of who we are. And I'll talk a little bit of when I talk through what we're doing related to decarbonization, kind of how that plays into our mission. But our vision is a healthy and sustainable built environment for all. So that kind of, both those two tie into why ASHRAE's getting involved in this space. So what is ASHRAE's position? Well, it's eliminating the greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment. We say it's essential to address climate change. And because the built environment is a pretty significant amount of, makes a significant contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions. So to do that, we've set two goals. One at a 2030 goal, looking at having the built environment having its 2014 emissions. And to do that, of course, that's only in 6 years from now, but new buildings really need to be net zero emissions. We need to have widespread retrofits going on of existing assets to be able to reduce the amount of emissions that those have. And, any new construction that's going on, the embodied carbon component of it needs to be reduced by about 40%. And then in 2050, that's the target out there, is to be net zero with greenhouse gas emissions across that whole life cycle. So how did we come up with that goal? I think I want to step back into a smidge of history here before I talk about the Center of Excellence. In the pandemic in 2020, ASHRAE was involved a lot with the indoor environment and the transmission of the diseases, because there happened to be something going on in the world at the time, and we created a task force, environmental task force, and that was very successful at getting technical information out to the world. We saw the same thing with decarbonization, and we created this task force for building decarbonization. And I'm going to go through this kind of fairly quickly, but there was a group that was really set up and reporting directly to our board of directors. So they were at the top of our organization to be able to really think about how can we act quickly and be able to do some things related to decarbonization. But we had to put some structure around it. What did we called the TFBD do? We wanted to focus on delivering some technical resources to get technical information out to our design engineers, coordinate decarbonization initiatives across other organizations. And the last one on this slide is specifically, we felt ASHRAE was probably not in a leadership position related to it, and we needed to get moving to get into a leadership position related to decarbonization. You can see some other specific, other objectives here on the screen. I'll let you read them, but the last one is actually to provide a plan for integrating all those activities into the ASHRAE structure, getting it into our society's strategic plan, kind of figuring out how to make decarbonization a part of what we do. So some of the key requirements that came out of it: we need to be more strategic. We need to prioritize our work effort on what the industry is looking, what the industry needs and what's of value to our members. And then we needed a process to get that information out in a fast and efficient manner. Of course, we needed staff and volunteer resources to get that all done. So we organized our TFBD into 4 key focus areas, and you can see them listed here, all centered around a knowledge resource hub, which we envisioned as a place for people to go for information, and ultimately that has been created and as part of the ASHRAE website. But I'm going to go through each one of these boxes in order. We'll start with the position document. So this is the document that really provides the basis for ASHRAE's work. It was created right away when we formed the TFBD. It was again reaffirmed in 2024, but it really contains many items, including the ASHRAE's position that I mentioned earlier, then the goals that I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of good background information related to the building industry and the amount of emissions related to it. So some technical background, and then as a basis for the position and the direction going forward. Now I mentioned we're a global organization that's been translated into multiple different languages, and you can see at least the cover page of each one of them on this slide. So that was really the basis that we wanted to get set in 2022 and use that to start developing some technical tools. One of the areas we took a look at what was out there in the industry and where the needs were. We made our best assessment of what we thought was needed from a technical guidance standpoint, and then and the way to deliver it. So ASHRAE not only develops standards on building standards and energy code standards and refrigerant standards, we also have a lot of technical guidelines or guides that we put together to help our members and others design buildings well. And so we kind of decided to build upon that thought process, and we have created a number of different technical guides. You can see the 3 of them that have been produced here. Building performance standards, really to help public officials that are looking at setting standards on their existing buildings or for performance related to greenhouse gas emissions. The second one, and which is really the first technical one that came out, was a grid interactive guide, really focused on, and I got the one that's got the spelling error on it, but grid interactive guide for building decarbonization, and goes through a lot of information related to how you can connect how you can utilize your building and the assets in your building to reduce its impact, just being smart about when energy is used. And then decarbonizing hospital buildings is next on the right. As hospitals themselves are a very big energy user, and the hospitals themselves are 24/7, very energy intensive, very emissions intensive, and a lot of existing hospitals specifically have processes that are very carbon intensive. And then there's a couple of guides we did in partnership with other organizations. The one on the left is a guide that has been developed with NREL, and one of the biggest tools that we see of being able to decarbonize our existing buildings and our new buildings is utilizing heat pumps. So we thought this was a key effort to develop a guide for heat pumps. So ASHRAE had concepted developing this guide, as well as NREL. So we got together and said, hey, we don't want to confuse the marketplace. Let's work together and figure out how to get this guide out jointly. And so that's what you're looking at there. The first version of that is out and available. And then on the right is with CIBSE. So CIBSE is an organization that's similar to ASHRAE, except they're in the UK. This one's talking about some embodied carbon calculation methodologies for different MEP components in which they call building services in the UK. So that's really a North American specific addendum to a TM65 standard that has been written by CIBSE. So with that, it allows people to make some estimates on what that embodied carbon is in the building. So those are some holes that we saw out there in the marketplace that we wanted to get filled. Notice that it doesn't hit everything, but it just was trying to be targeted and what we could get out as quickly as we can, but yet at the same level of quality that we have on our other guides that we have developed in the past, but trying to do it in about half or a third of the time that it has taken to get those developed. From a standards perspective, ASHRAE has a number of standards out there related to the buildings, but we needed to do a lot of different things, and this is where we're focused on some of our standards. One of them is just simply coordinating across our standard project committees. As far as addressing greenhouse gas emissions, trying to make it consistent and harmonize our standards regarding greenhouse gas emissions and their calculations. Even simple things like the GWP metrics. We had GWP 20, we had GWP 100, we had a number, different metrics being used in different standards. So trying to standardize a standard, so to speak, and trying to figure out also where we had gaps. So regarding operational and embodied carbon. So that was an effort that we did. Part of that is created this chart, and this is available on that Knowledge Hub. So if you go on the ASHRAE website and just search for CEBD or decarbonization, you'll be able to find this resource, but it takes a lot of our standards, and this is organized by new construction. Ones are shown here about, does that standard cover energy efficiency? Where is it related to carbon? So for example, the ASHRAE 90.1 2022 is the most recent version that's been issued, so under consideration the next update, which is 2025 for inclusion of operational carbon emissions. And then some of them have, embodied carbon as well. And this chart goes on for a few more different types of standards. Existing buildings is standard 100, which is being utilized a lot by different cities as a way to gather information and use it to set guidelines for existing buildings for a building performance standards viewpoint. ASHRAE standard 211 is that energy audit, and really this is adding a decarbonization component in, which we did in the addendum in 2023. But that whole standard in and of itself is looking to be updated as well to add decarbonization even more into the standard versus just as an appendix. And then there's a number of whole life carbon components related to that we're looking at, both from existing standards that we have, like ASHRAE standard 34, which covers the classification of refrigerants, which actually has been updated since to 2024. There was a newer standard issued, covers a lot of refrigerant emissions, but we also had a new proposed standard out there of 240p. We're doing that in conjunction with another organization. I'm drawing a blank which which is helping, which will create a methodology for carbon evaluating greenhouse gas emissions in the building, not only design, but construction and operation. So keeping going from standards, we had education. So from an education perspective, we knew that we needed to teach our members. We had a couple of courses that we had envisioned. First off, that's not listed here is we have what we call ASHRAE Learning Institute, which are in-person. We developed a 3-hour in-person course that provides some of the basics of decarbonization and why it's an issue, what are some of the methodology, what are the things you would be thinking about if you're looking to decarbonize a building. That coursework was developed about 3 years ago. It's been given many times to a lot of different number of our members and others that have done that. The second thing we've been focused on that more recently has been taking some of our guides that we've developed and putting them into an e-learning format. So not just you need to have the guide and be able to read it all, but kind of covering it in an e-learning format that can be also given as either an in-person 3-hour course where you'd have an instructor doing it live, or you have the ability to do it to take that in an e-learning format. All that's going to be all that is coming out as a module base. So for example, this Grid Interactive Buildings for Decarbonization has about a number of, I think it's got 12 different modules. Each of these future courses is going to have a number of different modules, and possibly even envisioning a subscription that people could get so they could have access to all of these. With the idea of the module is that if there's a specific topic you're really looking for, you go in, find that 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute long module, read that, watch that, get the information that you're needing, and then go about doing your job. So we did. That's all of an ongoing piece. Another part of education has been our conferences. This first one on the left was our first decarbonization conference, happened in 2022. It was in Athens, Greece. It was really started by the local chapter, along with some people at our society level that wanted to put this on. We had good attendance at it, and it was very energetic and a great knowledge sharing amongst the people. Our ASHRAE president, Ginger Scoggins, wanted to coordinate another decarbonization conference when she was president. So that was scheduled for October of the next year in Washington, D.C. That was very well attended. It was sold out weeks in advance, and people weren't able to attend the conference that wanted to just because this conference just sold out, which is kind of unheard of for ASHRAE for a technical conference, or what we call a specialty conference. Had an international building decarbonization conference in Madrid, more attendees available. That one sold out. More attendees were available for this one in New York City in October of this year. I think we had over 500 spots available. That one sold out as well. So the demand seems to be getting to be really high for specialty conferences related to decarbonization. And if you look at this next dot in October of this calendar year, we're going to have another one in Chicago. So as far as an upcoming one that we have is this one's going to be we're wanting to focus on decarbonization strategies for trying to scale it up. We've had some of the presentations, we're talking about this specific building or this other building, and we want to talk about how do we apply it to portfolios of buildings, and start getting what are some of the barriers to being able to get this done? How can we overcome those barriers, or how have they been overcome somewhere else? We're looking at an even larger venue, and it is expected to sell out. And again, you can sign up at that link if you get a copy of the slide deck. So those conferences are all focused on decarbonization. I saw earlier in the meeting, we were talking about the AHR Expo and the ASHRAE Winter Conference, which is coming up in February in Orlando. That will have a number of sessions that are going to be on decarbonization. That is really taking over both our annual and winter conference technical program. They're just a lot of people are putting decarbonization. They know because there's a lot of demand for it. Those are attended very well by the attendees that are going there. So our conference and exposition committee is really, looking at putting in content that our members want, and so that's really driving up that in our conference content. So I'm the vice chair of the Center of Excellence for Building Decarbonization. What is that? Well, this started in 2024 onward is where this became. And if you remember, one of the things that was a requirement of the task force for building decarbonization was to figure out how do we embed this within our structure of our organization. So what we've done is created the Center of Excellence right here, where it's actually a committee that reports directly to the Board of Directors Executive Committee, which is a group that meets monthly, and then they report to the Board of Directors. And we have a relationship with each of the three legs of the stool of ASHRAE. So ASHRAE is organized into three different councils to really get our work done: Members Council, Publishing and Education Council, and Technology Council. And we're really working with, we have representatives from each one of those on our CEBD. So our goals is, yes, we're going to report to the Board of Directors. We're going to have the number of different people from each one of the councils on our committee to really facilitate the work within that council and the CEBD. But we're really more becoming, instead of initially under the task force where we were trying to develop content as well as do other things, we become more of a strategy. So we're really focused on providing that strategic direction. Where is ASHRAE going related to decarbonization activities, and coordinating how decarbonization is in the strategic plan, and being that thought leader and really monitoring what are those issues out there in the space that we need to be focused on and need to be established, groups we might need to establish a relationship with, or areas where we need to be more involved. Two other primary responsibilities is that collaboration. I mentioned a little bit of, previously we have had some joint initiatives with other entities, and we want to continue that, and that's one of our roles. And then also work with our government affairs group for public advocacy. We're a technical organization. We want to provide technical information to government and government officials so they're making informed decisions, whatever they may be. We want to make sure they're making informed decisions. So we have our roughly 200 local chapters. They do meet with their own public officials, and we work to inform them and give them the information they need to be able to have conversations with their local officials related to decarbonization and decarbonization issues. There's other number of supporting activities. Yes, we'll do some technical reviews and provide some technical resources, and do a little bit of standard organizations. But some of these activities that we had been doing in the past of the TFBD we're more supporting of those, and that work is being done by the different councils within ASHRAE. And I'm going to go through and spend some time about what's going to be going on going forward. But we started really transition the TFBD and CFBD with a strategic planning meeting. Now, we held this in Chicago in May of last year, and you see a picture of one of our members there with the results of a number of different projects that we envisioned. So one of the activities that we had is, what does ASHRAE need to develop next? What should we be working on next? What's going to have the most value to our members? What's going to have the most value to society and have the biggest impact? So we came up with a number of different ideas, utilize our members to kind of vote and rank and prioritize. And out of that, we took that list and formalized it a little bit more coming out of May, and we came up with 18 different projects that we wanted to get moving on to help move decarbonization forward. So kind of like, what's the next round of what's coming? And the ones that are highlighted 1 through 7 are the ones that we thought that we were going to start after first. It's still a lot that we were biting off. We felt that we can't do everything. Let's do some of this first and then go forward. So let's talk about what these 7 projects are that we're looking to move forward with. The first one is, hey, we kind of took a guess at what our members needed from an education perspective. Let's step back and figure out what those ASHRAE members need. So this is really maybe a little bit different. This is an internal activity that we decided to take on. and thought we needed to do this first. We wanted to do this as quickly as possible to be able to get information to feed back into what we're actually going to be developing from a content point of view. I'll have an update on what's going on with that a little bit later. The second most important was actually tracking refrigerant emissions. So refrigerants themselves, particularly HFCs, have quite a bit of impact on the environment from a global warming potential, and so our greenhouse gas or CO2 equivalent of those is important. But there's not a lot of good data out there. And again, I mentioned we're a technical organization, so let's focus on finding, getting more information regarding a refrigerant leakage database. What's actually the leakage rates that are out there? How much does a chiller leak? How much does a VRF system leak? How much does the different systems that we have in buildings leak from a refrigerant perspective, so that we can have real data that we're utilizing when we're doing our calculations of the embodied carbon or the impact of that leakage that is going to happen over time, so that we're making smart decisions on what's the right system to choose in our buildings. So that's get more data. The next one here, where we have a number of different decarbonization standards and really trying to streamline their compliance. And this is really focused on, the global building sector is really 40% of energy related CO2 emissions is from buildings. And of course, it's really important to address decarbonization, but there's really a lot of, no holistic carbon regulations and a lot of different standards out there. We thought there's a need to look for ways to streamline that, and you can see the number of collaborators that we kind of identified that can maybe help with that. The next project is streamlining our building codes and really focused on creating a framework for an international building code. Now, there's a lot of growth in this world that's going to be happening. In fact, there's from a building square footage standpoint, the world is building a New York City every 32 days or so. Roughly every month, a New York City is being built as far as number of square footage around the world. And if you look between now and 2050, there's a lot of that growth that's going to happen in an area called the Global South, and a lot of areas that are not as they're more of an emerging economy. They don't have any energy codes or any energy framework. So if we're going to really try and meet the goals of that 2050, we're going to really need to be doing good in those areas. So this creates a framework of how can we create a building code for them that's 30 pages, not 300 like ours are right now, especially related to energy and carbon. So identified lots of potential collaborators with this, including some countries, and I'll talk a little about where that's going. One of the things that needs to happen is if you're going to calculate how much your embodied carbon is for one piece of equipment or another, need to have a standard, so a product category rule developed that outlines like how that environmental product declaration from a product is done. How is that calculated? How is it consistent? So there's maybe a lot of standardization in some areas of the built environment, but in the MEP world, there's still a lot of work to be done. So in carpet, I think this might be known very well, but in an HVAC component, a chiller, this is a little bit more fuzzy. So really focus on providing some tighter product category rule definitions, and you can see we identified some collaborators, including standard 240p. 244, which I'll talk about in a bit, which is a standard that what P means is one that's it's proposed. It's a sustainability assessment for MEP products. So moving on, ASHRAE has 4 versions of an ASHRAE handbook. Each of the volumes is well used and well known. The applications handbook specifically has equipment service life. If you want to know how long your boiler is going to be around or your air conditioning unit, There is more than likely something in that chapter 38 that says how long that's going to be there. This is important when you're understanding over the life of your building, how many times you're going to need to replace that piece of equipment so that you can calculate that all of those carbon impacts correctly. Well, when you look at that data, I mean, that data is actually from two different research projects that ASHRAE did. One was in 1978, the other one in 2005. So we really thought there's a need to get that updated into more recent data on how long different components last. And there's even some, systems that aren't that we use today that aren't in the guide. So definitely need to get some information there out as far as service life data. Next is to standardize calculations for whole life carbon of building systems. So I briefly talked about the word embodied carbon. So, there is operational carbon, which is the carbon related to running a building, but the embodied carbon is the carbon related to the components that go into a building. So whether that's the carbon related to the steel that gets put into the air handling unit or the ductwork or the insulation, it's all the impacts of that. So it's trying to calculate a whole life carbon methodology. So looking at both the initial install and the operational and the replacement of different equipment over the life of the building, and looking at which one of what's that calculation methodology for building systems, HVAC building systems, to help our members to be able to select systems that have that lowest life cycle carbon approach. So where's this list today? So we're here in January 2025. It's not that long since we developed the list. We've actually had some changes going on. We created those little highlights that I showed you. And, one of the things is we've actually taken this one off the list as far as something that's the CEPD is really focused on, because our SSPC 90.1 committee had already been starting to get focused on this same thing. So they're kind of taking the lead on it. We're helping coordinate it. And another one is the PCR protocols for enhanced EPDs precision. It is really being addressed by SPC 244P, which I mentioned is the sustainability assessment of MEP systems. That standard development cycle had already been started. We weren't necessarily aware of it, so we got that coordinated and they're able to work on it. But we are moving forward with most of these other ones. And right now we are looking to get these funded in our next meeting in February in Orlando. We're looking to get the rest of these projects funded so we can start moving them forward. So we can do things like in the equipment service life data, get an RFP together to get out to a researcher to be able to start gathering the data so that we have the technical basis of information going forward. So those are starting to move forward. And oh yeah, there was one more here. We decided to change this one a little bit. So previously it was, standardizing the calculations. We determined the first step is we really need to do some benchmarking data. So this is really turned into like a 1-year research project to be able to gather some information. And then based on what that information says, it'll help inform us what the next step is on where that might go. It can also be useful for that whole life carbon options tool and the carbon trade-offs on 8 and 9. We also took on our residential building committee is putting together a short guide on sustainable retrofits. Not too in depth, but they're doing that with their volunteer resources and then a little bit of marketing time to put that together. So we're able to do that one pretty cost effectively. And regarding the last type, supermarket industry archetypes, supermarkets, similar to hospitals, use a tremendous amount of energy, and there's a lot of them, right? We all go to one fairly often to be able to get our groceries, and they're very energy intensive. And there's been a number of different major players in that industry that own multiple facilities that are looking to, try and develop a guide similar to the guides that we developed previously, but this one's going to be focused on supermarkets. All right, so that's some of the near-term activities that we're going to be we're starting to move forward with, but we got a number of other ones I want to go forward with it and cover as well. I mentioned awards in the blurb about this presentation. It's important to both, if we're going to infuse decarbonization within the organization of ASHRAE, we want to make sure that we recognize people that are doing that, right? So picture at the right, Eunice Foote Decarbonization Award. Eunice Foote was really, so this award recognizes our members that we're working to reduce carbon emissions in the built environment. And then at the chapter level, both last society year, so ASHRAE goes, society years are July through June. So this is both last year and this year, we've had a decarbonization challenge fund. So this is putting grants out for different chapters. So our ASHRAE chapters can put in for a grant in the range of $1,000 to $10,000 to implement a decarbonization project within their chapter. And that can be a variety of different things. We gave awards to, I believe, 8 different chapters this last year. And we actually even we had budgeted a certain amount of funding. We actually did a little bit more based on the quality of some of the submissions. So not only does that do something good by reducing, carbon where the chapter is located, but it also gets the members engaged in decarbonization activities as well. And that's a good thing. We have certifications that we have in ASHRAE. We created one for a decarbonization professional. It's a brand new ASHRAE certification. We have announced our first group of CPDs in September of 2023, and you could see there's only 93 of them in the first group, and where they're roughly located from a country perspective. But so this is a coursework, or not a coursework, a test that was developed that would judge an individual's knowledge on decarbonization and whether they'll be able to effectively do a decarbonization project. The goal behind this is we want decarbonization and decarbonization projects to be done right and to be done that way and be done successfully. We don't want them to be done unsuccessfully, because we don't want to create anything negative out there from a perspective, public perception of, you don't want to put in heat pumps because they won't work or anything like that. So that's one of the purposes, is get people to separate themselves as, hey, if you go with somebody like this, they do have that level of expertise in decarbonization. I mentioned our member survey, or our understanding from our members what they wanted from a decarbonization training and education priorities. We surveyed our members about a number of different topics, but we had a couple of decarbonization training and education specific questions. So we've got thousands of responses of data to coming back and feeding this, and really came out with 3 different areas that were important to our members. One, the printed and digital documents and the professional development courses are the 2 that are the top 2, and those are the lines that you see going across the slide. And then each one of those dots happens to represent a different segment of ASHRAE membership type. The dip that you're seeing, and then the increase in the last one, which is educational videos, is manufacturing and sales people. So people identify with that group. But educational videos is important. And we initially even did a number of social media videos, 3-minute videos, 5-minute videos, 7-minute videos that we would post on social media. But those aren't as important to people as an educational one on a topic a little bit more. They can get into it a little bit deeper and get some information out of it. So I think the e-learning courses that we developed on a module basis is that we're probably going to continue and grow that even more, because that seems to be what a segment of our membership is looking for. We do have a couple more technical guides coming out this month. I believe we're going to be coming out with the decarbonization retrofits for commercial and multifamily buildings. That should be available in January 2025. So that's this month. And then a whole life carbon guide for building systems. I mentioned we're looking at coming up with standards related to it, but this is a guide on whole life carbon for building systems. That's been literally just finished on Sunday. I sent that into our ASHRAE publication staff to get this formatted and be ready to be able to get published. They're working hard on our winter conference coming up, but so this will be end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter of this year. And again, all these are available on the ASHRAE website. We did a joint or doing a joint one with USGBC on strategic guide for decarbonization planning. So helping a building owner plan their decarbonization effort over time to get to the 2040, 2050, whatever their goal might be. And then the last one on the right is really a version 2.0 of the building thermal systems guide, taking heat pumps and heat pump systems to kind of the next level. Cold climates, how does thermal storage really affect the sizing of your heat pump? So there's a couple of different topics that we wanted to dive into in a lot more detail, and so that information's coming out. So we were balancing getting it all together in one guide and getting it out, or getting out the first version and then the second version will be out a little bit later, because there's a little bit of, we know there's value in being speed to market. I mentioned that we have over 200 chapters, or about 200 chapters. So for their chapter meetings are roughly 45, 50 minutes. We've got a number of different presentations out there that we've been trying to develop to be able to be given at those chapter meetings. And you could see, one of our CEBD members on the right is giving one at the Golden Gate chapter. We also have some videos online of for example, this is a Decarb 101. It's a 3-part series it's recorded and online, and by Kent Peterson, who's the current chair of the CEBD. We're in the middle of doing 4 more presentations. You can see that 3 of them are in the correct format, and 1 is not at the moment on whole life decarbonization strategies for new buildings, but currently getting 4 more developed to be used for our chapter members. So that's something new that's coming out in the near future. And other resources that we're working on is, again, developing what that member need is. We're going to do a little bit more data gathering at that winter conference in Orlando. Our training and education committee already has the initial results, so they're reviewing those to try and come up with what are the next areas we need to focus on. We've allocated a number of different courses in our funding requests that we're going to be moving forward at the winter conference, including we still have the e-learning underway on our decarbonization building thermal systems, our hospital, and our whole life carbon guide. So all those exact priorities are going to develop soon, but it's still moving forward. And then what's the next round of projects? We've got, this list that we had previously. We probably will be moving forward with some of those, but really we're going to have another strategic planning session this spring. And these priorities might change. New ideas might come forth on areas where we need to focus next. And then how many we can tackle is going to be based on, how well these first, 7, 8 activities we got going forward are going forward. We don't want to slow any of them down from getting developed by putting too much on anybody's one plate. So we're judging a little bit of how much by utilizing the entire organization, what is the speed that we can actually get some of these, what's the volume, what's the throughput that we can actually do. So really focused on where that's at. So I've mentioned strategic partnerships, a number of them as I've gone through the presentation. Some of them are listed here that, on the flexible building codes, for example, where, IEA is helping. We did a presentation at COP. We've done presentations in a number of different countries related to flexible building codes. We're really going to be working focused on a framework with Indonesia. Net Zero World is involved, as well as Berkeley Lab is helping funding that pilot in Indonesia. So you can see a lot of different organizations around the world, and we want to continue to work with others to help leverage those relationships. So kind of getting to the end of it here is our strategic approach is really, how do we want decarbonization to become infused into the organization. And I think that's, gradually happening. A lot of our members are very energized in this. They also see their clients are looking for this information, or they're just wanting to learn more about it because they know it's going to be coming at some point as far as the demand for it. We always want to provide solid technical-based information into the marketplace. And of course, we want to work with any other organization out there to maximize impact. We're not wanting to do something on our own just to do it on our own. We want to do what it makes sense to be able to get that information out to the marketplace or the industry as quickly as possible. And as you can tell, maybe even just on ideas and things that we thought we were going to be doing not even a year ago, and we've pivoted on some of those or changed their scope a little bit. We need to continually adapt. This area is changing, continues to change. New information becomes available, and we need to be able to continue to be reactive to it. So who is the Center of Excellence for Building Decarbonization? It's really this group of individuals, really focused on that's really the committee. We meet every 2 weeks, go over a number of different initiatives, make sure we're continuing to move things forward.
Thank you, Blake, for that very interesting presentation. For more information about the GridWise Architecture Council, please see our website at gridwiseac.org. And don't forget to subscribe to your YouTube channel at the site listed. Thank you.